Today we're going to be seeing how Adam Ragusea makes his sauce bolognese. Maybe we should have reviewed this video with Vincenzo.
While it's still hot, put in a little bit more balsamic.
Oh my god, more balsamic!
For everyone that's new to the channel, welcome. My name is James. I've been cooking for many years in the United States and over here in Europe. And let's get started.
When I make bolognese sauce, I make a giant pot because you can use it for a ton of things and it freezes really well.
This is true. If you're going to be making something that takes a very long time, it's best to make a big batch, freeze it, and that way you don't have to make it again until a lot later.
My bolognese starts with a whole pound of carrots. They make the sauce sweet and hearty. The skins are bitter, so I take them off. So are the root ends. You got to cut them off too. The tips just tend to be a little bit dried out. Doesn't really matter if you cut them off.
I see that we're using the favorite plastic cutting board again.
I really don't season or flavor my steak. I flavor my cutting board.
What? Carrots can add a very nice, sweet flavor to your dish. And in Italian cooking, as well as in French, the base to many dishes is called a soffritto, or mirepoix in French. And a soffritto is carrots, onion, and celery.
Now to dice carrots, you cut them in half, then you cut each half into long, thin slices. Then you lay the slices flat and you cut them into matchsticks. Then you cut across the matchsticks to make a fine dice, and this is gonna take forever, and I am using my food processor.
It can take a long time, and if you want to use a food processor, especially when making things like bolognese, or if you're gonna make a soup or something and you're gonna blend it, it's not a problem. Do it. It saves you time in the kitchen. Just one thing though, when cutting any vegetables, please do not hold your vegetables like Adam does. Unless it does work for you, that's fine, but it's a very easy way on cutting your thumb.
This usually goes better if you break the carrots into chunks before you put them in. There, doesn't need to be too fine nor too perfect, because this is gonna cook for hours. It'll all break down. Now I do one large red onion, and onions you really do need to cut into a few chunks before you process them, and only doing one half at a time helps too. Otherwise some big pieces just seem to never get cut up, they just spin around.
We're not going to be adding any celery to this. I mean, if you don't have it, that's fine, but if you're going to be making a soffritto, you add it. It's flavor.
This is my 10-quart Dutch oven. If I could only have one pot or pan in my whole kitchen, this would be it. You can do almost anything in it, but for this, use the largest pot that you've got, or maybe a couple of smaller ones.
I agree with Adam on this. It is a wonderful tool to have in the kitchen. If you don't have one, you need to get one. It doesn't need to be an expensive brand, but trust me, they make cooking a lot easier, and well, they can also cook a lot quicker as well.
Gonna fry the veggies in olive oil on high heat. There's a ton of water in these, so they're not gonna burn as long as you keep them moving. We just gotta give them a head start on the cooking. When they've shrunk down and they're looking soft, I dump them out. More oil in the pan, and then 3 pounds of ground meat. This is beef chuck, but you could use something leaner like sirloin, but I really like the fat. And sometimes I use lamb too, which is really nice.
Now for everybody watching, if you don't know, there are many different types of ragu, depending on where in Italy it is from. In Bologna, where we get our bolognese from, it's more ground meat. So this is a very common thing to see in America when you think of bolognese, is with ground meat, but technically, it can be a lot of different types of sauces. Now, in some parts of Italy, they may actually use lamb. And if you are from Italy and you do, then let us know. But I don't think that it would be a bad thing. And the one important thing about cooking is to always experiment. However, there are limitations.
So get a little milk and just kind of pour it in. So delicioso.
Now, this is the most important and labor-intensive step of the whole process. I switch over to a wooden spoon and I use it to mash up the ground meat as I am stirring it around. I'm really going to town on this stuff, breaking it all apart. I don't want little meatballs in this sauce, and if they form now, it'll be nearly impossible to break them up later. So with that rigid spoon, I'm just stirring and mashing, stirring and mashing. 5 minutes go by, and now the meat is kind of gray and swimming in liquid.
Now what Adam is doing by sauteing the vegetables first, taking them out so you have more space in the pan, and then searing the beef, this is a good thing. But, ¿qué pasa? You want to get a very nice sear. You don't want to be moving the meat around in the beginning. You want to leave it, let it get a very nice color on it, and then move it. And if you have too much beef in the pan, so instead of getting that nice sear, it's just going to be boiling the beef, then add it in stages. I would suggest adding half at a time, sear it, cook it off, and then add the rest and do it again. And that way you won't have standing water in the pan, not as much. It will evaporate faster, and you get more color in the beef.
A lot of people think that's fat. It's mostly water, and it will boil off. Just keep cooking on high heat and keep everything moving or it'll stick and burn. Another 5 minutes go by, and as the water evaporates, the sound changes. Instead of hissing, the pan starts to roar and crackle. That is the sound of all those little bits of meat starting to fry in their own rendered fat. Now is when this will change from gray to brown, and the kitchen will suddenly smell different. It'll smell amazing. If you're not doing this with your ground beef recipes, you are missing out.
Again, your meat shouldn't be boiling in its own water and fat. You should be searing it, frying it. It needs to have color. It shouldn't be gray.
Now comes the secret ingredient, a pound of chicken livers. I am not kidding. I lifted this idea from Barbara Lynch. It is genius. I just dumped them in the food processor. I don't want to turn them into pate, but something just short of that.
It is actually important to remove a few of the veins that are in the livers. And it's also a good idea to wash them.
And in they go toward the end of the browning process. Liver gets gritty if you overcook it.
If there are any Italians watching though, then please let me know down below. If you do use livers in your Bolognese or in any of the sauces, really.
Then I stir in a 6-ounce can of tomato paste, and at this point you gotta be really careful. See that carpet of brown stuff stuck to the bottom? The second that's about to burn, I pour in a whole bottle of white wine and scrape like a mother. Scrape, 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 scrape the whole bottom off because it tastes good, and if you leave it there, it's gonna burn.
Adam needs to swear more in his cooking videos. It's hilarious. When using tomato paste, it is a good idea to add it in later and not in the beginning because it can burn on you. Tomato paste is highly concentrated, and the rest of the sugars that are in that paste can caramelize quickly. If you are going to deglaze with wine, it is very important that you reduce it by at least half or more, but you don't necessarily need to add a whole bottle of wine to this. You can save a bottle. Have a glass for yourself while you're cooking, and that's the best thing, you know? A glass for the Bolognese and the rest for the chef. However, if you're going to be using wine with beef, it may be a better idea to use a red wine or a darker wine instead of white.
Vegetables go back in. They would have burned if I'd left them in while I browned the meat. Then a good quality 28-ounce can of crushed tomatoes. Then another one, and then another one. I'm going for something halfway between the traditional ragu alla bolognese, which has hardly any tomato at all in it, and the traditional Italian-American meat sauce, which is basically tomato sauce with little clumps of ground beef floating around in it. I like something in the middle of those extremes.
Now, Adam just said that he's not making it traditional. This is fine. But normally though, when making this type of bolognese, you do not add a lot of sauce. It's more of a meaty sauce than it is just the sauce. In America, we do like our sauces, and we add sauces with everything, and well, our sauces do tend to be a little more saucy.
Here comes my favorite cheat, liquid chicken bouillon, a big spoonful. It's crazy salty, but this big pot needs salt, so it's fine.
Chicken bouillon. I don't think this is something that Vincenzo would like.
What's wrong with real salt? What is wrong with pork? What is wrong with the Parmigiano Reggiano that you add at the end? That's your beautiful salt. What do you need this for? Huh?
So all in all, no apio or no celery to this chicken liver, chicken bouillon, as well as a bottle of wine, white wine.
Now, I just get this to a heat where it's kind of burbling, and I'm going to cook it for 3 hours, stirring every 15 minutes or so to make sure the bottom doesn't catch and burn.
Now, personally, I would suggest to put a lid on it to increase the temperature. You can even leave it ajar so you allow a bit of the moisture to evaporate, and to put it on a lower setting. That way you don't have to mix it every 15 minutes. Although it is a good idea to keep an eye on it so you don't burn it. This is true.
While we're waiting, let's talk about those chicken livers. Don't be freaked out. This sauce will not taste like liver. You don't have to tell anybody they're in there. It will, however, taste meatier than any meat sauce you've ever had, and that is thanks in no small part to the livers. All right, it's been 2 hours. Let's have a look at this thing.
You can tell that everybody's just waiting for this to be over, can't you? What you could do is divide this into a smaller batch, or put a portion of this into a smaller pan and add the chicken livers to that, cook it, and then taste it to see if it does enhance the flavor and you like it more.
I'm always amazed by how little this reduces, and yet it does thicken up. I reckon that's just from all the solids breaking down. This is when I season. I do about a tablespoon of dried basil, dried parsley, dried oregano, and a little less dried thyme. I have no idea how much garlic powder that is. Whole bunch of pepper, and then this instant source of sweet and sour, maybe a 1/4 cup of balsamic vinegar.
Balsamic vinegar! With the bolognese, I've never added vinegar to my bolognese. For all the Italians watching, let us know your thoughts down below.
I generally think dried herbs are better for long-cooked dishes, and even then I think they taste better if you put them in during the last hour of cooking. The vinegar you could put in whenever, as long as the sauce is hot. That'll boil off the harsh vinegar scent.
With this, I do disagree with Adam on the dried herbs. I prefer fresh. If you have fresh thyme, fresh basil, fresh oregano, fresh rosemary, all of these herbs will add a lot more flavor than the dried. The dried herbs lose some of the oils and they have a different flavor profile than the fresh. But thinking about it though, in the old days, before having tomato in Italy, because this was introduced to Italy, what did the old recipes contain with the Bolognese?
An hour later, and I put some pasta on the boil. Look at how thick and rich that is now. Time to give it a taste. I'll do a little bit more balsamic and some salt. Remember that all sauces should be too strong because their flavor will be diluted by the rest of the food.
How much salt did Adam just add? Let's take a look at that.
And some salt.
He added like a pinch. Nothing. Keep in mind though, he did add a lot of other ingredients that are a little salty, like the chicken bouillon, which may even have a little MSG in it.
MSG is the king of flavor. If you sad in life, use MSG. If you're happy in life, use MSG. You just get a baby, put MSG on baby. It'll be better baby, smarter.
Drain the pasta, and I just do a couple of big spoonfuls of sauce per portion with a little fresh herb in there. That's parsley. Grate some cheese on top, and I like to drizzle some raw olive oil on the plate. Now that's damn good, but let me show you a variation. Sometimes I spoon some sauce into a pot and drizzle in some heavy cream. Boil it until the cream thickens and throw in the pasta and some fresh basil, and that is sweet and sour and meaty and velvety and rich all at the same time.
Thinking about it, Vincenzo even recommended this, and I have seen other Italians suggest this as well, is that they do actually add like cream or milk to their bolognese, and I have tried it and it does work. It does lighten the color though of the bolognese. It makes it less red.
Once the rest of the sauce cools down a bit, I just smear it into a whole bunch of ice cube trays. You could freeze it in a big plastic bin or something, but this makes it so easy to thaw out exactly the amount that you need. Throw them in the freezer, come back the next day, and just twist to release them and dump them into a giant Ziploc bag. Then, when you get home at the end of a long day, you just grab 3 cubes per person, throw them in a bowl, and microwave until thawed. And while it's still hot, put in a little bit more balsamic. That really brightens it back up again after it's been in the freezer for a while.
Adam likes vinegar, doesn't he? This is a good little idea to make it a lot easier for you so you don't need to like make dinner every night, to freeze them into manageable sized portions.
And again, that hot sauce will boil off the harsh nose of the vinegar. Just throw that on your pasta and you've got a deeply flavored, slow simmered, home cooked meal in like 10 minutes or however long it took to boil the pasta. I don't know what I would do without this stuff. It's great. I had some extra that I didn't freeze, by the way. I am going to use that to make my lasagna, which is going to be the next video that I edit.
Now, even though that this recipe wasn't a very traditional recipe, which is fine, this is his own recipe, it did look very good at the end. There are a few things that I probably wouldn't add to mine with the balsamic vinegar, the chicken bouillon, the livers and things like this. But at the end of the day, it is a good idea to experiment and to see what you like. Although if you are going to follow like Frank's recipe by adding a little bit of like orange peel to it,
figure out how Frank does this.
I find that orange rind bumps up that tomato flavor. It has a little bit of sharpness to kind of cut some of that fat.
Hold on.
Hopefully you did enjoy this video and you did learn a little something as well. Be sure to give it a like and a share, but most importantly, if you haven't subscribed yet to the channel, be sure to do so you don't miss out on any content, and be sure to check out this next video coming up here. Until next time, take care.